In this episode, we were enlightened on our guest's bipolar journey and how he dealt with the roller coasters of life, including suicidal intentions. He's the author of the book titled Teetering on Tightrope. Welcome to the show, Stephen. How are you doing?
Good. How you doing, Toby?
I'm doing great today. Thank you so much for making all the time to speak with me on this episode.
Sure.
I'm looking forward to having a soulful conversation with you and diving into your past, diving into your journey of bipolar disorder and all of that. So I don't know, Stephen, if it's okay for you or if it's possible for you to share your journey with us so far. Like, after being diagnosed in 1978, how has that journey been like since then?
Well, my real journey began when I was 9 years old. I've always enjoyed going to the movies, and we used to go when I was young to the movie theater every Saturday to watch westerns. And one Saturday, we saw that there would be double features, two movies. So we watched the first movie, and then I went up to the concession stand to buy a Coke and some popcorn. And the Coke you'd get from a machine in the corner. And I went over to get my Coke, and all of a sudden, some guy put a dime in and bought me my Coke. I thanked him, and then he said, "Well, would you help me with something here in the theater?" Well, being a naive 9-year-old, I said, "Sure."
Hmm.
So he guided me down the hall and then pushed me into the restroom and sexually assaulted me.
Hmm.
I didn't know what the hell was happening. I didn't know it could happen. I wondered what the hell was wrong with me that someone would want to do that to me. I didn't tell anybody for 30 years. It was my secret, and that was the beginning of what was my journey. At first, it was not diagnosed for the next 12 years because there was no one to diagnose it. I didn't know anything about psychiatry or anything else. I never told my parents, never told my siblings, never told my friends. So I dealt with it all by myself. And I had my first depressive episode later that same year. It was terrible. I felt worthless. Felt like I would be better off if I was dead. I couldn't study. I didn't want to do anything. Well, that lasted for a month or so, and then it lifted, and I got better for a few months, whatever. And that was the beginning of many, many years of depressive episodes. Now, they come like on a roller coaster. In other words, they're bad. And then whatever your cycle is, they'll get better. You'll go up and you'll be able to have some good times. So it's not like what most people think where you're just down all the time. That's not the way it works. So I was able to have some pretty good times and a lot of bad times also, where I was able to fake people out by acting like everything was fine in high school. But a lot of the time during the year, I'd go home and crash. This went on all through college. When I graduated college, I was at my worst. My mother figured out something was wrong and sent me finally to a psychiatrist. And I continued to get bad. And one day I got in a fight with my dad, and I ended up in a mental hospital for 3 weeks. They diagnosed me as clinically depressed, which means it's not like having the blues. It's bad and going to continue forever. So for the next 6 or 8 years, I was really bad because none of the medications worked. Nothing helped. I got sick all the time, and I lost all kind of jobs. I couldn't work. I was angry. I would yell at my bosses. I would do all kinds of things. So I usually only kept a job for about 6 months till they either threw me out or I quit. And the depression got so bad that I started with suicidal ideations, although I never tried. I have always been a swimmer, and I would go swim laps every day, and it started to be that every lap I would tell myself to kill myself. And it got so bad that I was going to the psychiatrist 3 times a week. And finally, he came in and said, I made a mistake. You're not depressed. You're bipolar. Well, hell, I'd never heard of bipolar. I didn't know what it was. But there was a new wonder drug called lithium that had been working very well for bipolar for about the last 10 years. And I tried it, and it worked very well for me. And overnight, it got me about 50% better. I was able to work again. I was able to function. There were still a lot of problems, but I got a good chunk of my life back. And that took me up to about 1980, as I said. But I still have problems with ruminations, which are the mind is out of control. If I would say something mean to somebody, I would worry and obsess with it just over and over and over again. I couldn't turn off my mind. And that's a big part of mental illness, is the inability to shut your mind down. And at night, it would keep me from sleeping. And then it would affect my job because I would be thinking about it all the time. It wasn't bad enough to keep me from working, but it wasn't good either. And then in 2000, I got a new psychiatrist, and he put me on a new pill, which is called Paxil, and the ruminations went away. And I've been in pretty good shape since then. So my real journey lasted from 19 to 2000, 42 years. Anybody suffering with a mental illness like this should understand that depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, manic depression, mania, they're not curable. They are going to be with you all your life, and you've got to learn to face that and to always strive forward, because you can and will get a lot of relief if you stick with it. So,
Yeah, thank you so much for
that's my
sharing that.
journey.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, going deep into your past and explaining your journey with us. And, you adding that part to it at the end, saying it's something that could be with you for the rest of your life. It's really, it gives one a lot to think about. And that's what is inspiring my next question right now. And I believe that's also what is behind your book, Teetering on a Tightrope. Having been diagnosed with this, and this is something you have to deal with for the rest of your life. How do you then find balance in life? How do you then find a way to undo the situation and live a normal life?
Well, after being really bad for all those years, there's 42 years, and then all of a sudden getting my life back to where today I'm about 90% to the good. I'll tell you what happened. I had a clothing store in Ohio, and every Christmas we would hire young junior high or high school students to run errands for us, wrap packages, and so on, because we were just too busy to do it ourselves. So this one year I hired a young lady. She was a sophomore in high school, and she was really a hell of a girl. She was just young and bubbly and loved to laugh, and was a good basketball player, had the world going for her, and everything was great. I thought she was a wonderful young lady. One Saturday, her best friend, who also worked for us, met me at the store early and was crying and told me that her best friend, the other girl who was working for us, had taken a gun with her to bed the night before and shot and killed herself. Just around the same time, a college buddy of mine called me up and said that his son had been depressed for a long time and had been breaking into houses probably so he could get money for dope. And they caught him breaking into a house. The cops had him in the back of the squad car and called his parents to come get him. They got out of the car. He got out of the car. He said, "Mom and Dad, I love you, but I can't take it anymore." Pulled out a gun and shot himself in the head, too.
Ooh.
Well, I had experienced the same thing as a 20-year-old, and was well versed in it, knew quite a bit about teenage depression. And I decided I would go speak to high school health and psychology classes. And every speech I gave, at the end, I would ask anybody who wanted to come up, talk to me about what they were going through. And on one occasion, a young lady came up. She was the star athlete, the queen of the class, everything, straight A's, probably got 1,600 on her SAT. She was really cool. She says to me, "Mr. Wilson, I can't stand it. There's so much pressure on me to be the best basketball player, to get into the highest rated college. My parents are just beating me to death." Not beating, but making her do her best. Teachers were expecting everything out of her, and she was just broken. Didn't know how to get through it. Well, that was the only time I saw the girl, but she was in so much pain, it was just sad. I told her she needed to get in touch with a child psychologist. Not long after that, one girl came up and said, "Mr. Wilson, nobody likes me. I have no friends. My parents hate me. There's no sense in me going on. I want to run away. I want to die." Well, all I could do was give her the same advice. But it really taught me about how bad mental illness is, not only in the United States, but in the world.
Yeah.
I looked up the statistics. 20% of Americans have mental illness, and that holds true for just about anywhere in the world. We have a system over here in the States that is inadequate. If you have money and can get treatment, more power to you. You'll get taken care of. If you're someone who makes a modest living, lives from day to day on their paycheck, you're out of luck, because the insurance companies have devised their plan to minimize how much they give to the professional psychiatrists and psychologists for their insurance. And the providers can't make enough money, so they have to not accept insurance, or they have to raise their prices, and the average Joe can't afford it. So what we do in the U.S. is have a system here. The one here in Arizona is called Access. It's actually government funded for mentally ill. They go to clinics. They don't have to pay for their medication. They can get therapy. But they're so overwhelmed that it is very difficult to receive the help they need. By the way, I've also checked this out in other countries. Their systems aren't the same, but very similar. So the people just aren't getting enough help, and the government doesn't see it as a priority. They can't see the disease. It's not like if you had a heart attack and somebody can see you're suffering. When you're mentally ill, nobody knows it unless you tell them. So the government just turns a blind eye to it. And one of the only reliefs for therapy is going to mental health support groups. And I facilitate 2 of them each week. Just did one last night. I have about 15 people who I can get through in a 2-hour session. Now, if you do the math, 20% of the U.S. population that is mentally ill, population of the U.S. is about 300 million. Well, 20 is 60 million. So that kind of give you an idea of how many people are really suffering in the U.S. from one degree to another.
Mm.
But in my groups, I find out, and have found out, I've seen well over 1,000 people in the 8 years I've been doing it, that a lot of the problems stem from abuse when they're young, mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. And a lot of the times it's from a family member, a parent, a sibling, uncles, friends of the families. And I don't think that the people responsible for doing this to their children realize that they ruin their lives. It took 42 years away from me. And it goes on and on and on. Every country, every society, and the world does very little about it.
Yeah.
But that's what I've been doing.
That's very good. I'm so glad that you're giving back to the community by, providing these sessions for people out there who need that help. And one question that keeps coming back to my mind right now is from your story, the story that you shared. In 1958, you were sexually assaulted, and that must have been a very horrible experience. And I would just like to ask and know how you were able to process that and heal from that trauma. And also how that experience, might have influenced your bipolar disorder journey also.
I didn't get what you said. I'm having trouble with your accent.
Yeah. So I
repeat
asked,
that.
yes. So I said in 19 you were diagnosed, sorry. in 1958 you experienced sexual assault.
Yes.
So my question is, how did that, how were you able to heal from that sexual assault trauma, the trauma that came with it? How have you been able to heal from that experience? And did that experience in any way influence the bipolar disorder?
Well, there's a couple thoughts on how the sexual assault would have started or influenced the bipolar. There is no definitive answer. Along with the sexual assault, I've looked back on my relatives and past relations and everything, and there is a connection between ancestry and who I am, and people in the past of our family who have suffered from mental illness. But there's no definitive answer as to why people are susceptible to these different diagnoses. I will tell you that some good comes out of things like this. Now, let's move to a totally new topic, and that's treatment. Because I often ask myself, why do some people who were afflicted with a mental illness survive so well and get through life and have a good life? And why do so many never get there and they just go from bad day to bad day? We always talk about medication, and we think that medication is the end all and be all, and that if you get the medication that works for you, you'll be fine. Well, that's true about 50% of the time. Now, you got to realize there is no cure for bipolar, and only 50% of the people are going to get relief from medication.
Mm.
And of all the people who are faced with mental illness, they can be their own worst enemy. Mm-hmm. Because if they, first of all, then they say, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm not going to go see a psychiatrist, I don't believe in them. So they stumble through life with no help at all. Mm-hmm. There's the second group that they're told when they go on medication that the medication takes a month or two to start working. Well, evidently a lot of people didn't hear that, so if the medication doesn't work in a couple of weeks, they quit, throw it away, never go back. So they don't get any help. And then there's a third group that says, okay, I'll try the medication. And it works. And maybe 6 months later, they're feeling really good. And they go, well, I don't need this medication anymore. I'm feeling too good.
Mm.
So they throw away the medication. And a couple months later, they go back to where they were. So it's not always the fault of the psychiatrist or the therapist. It's how we deal with the whole process. And most people don't realize that it is a lifelong journey and they give up too soon. Then there are the 50% of the people out there who don't get relief from medication. There are modalities they can use that really can help, but they don't know anything about them. A few of them are EMDR, which is magnetic eye movement. Then there's dialectical behavioral therapy. There's cognitive behavioral therapy. There are a lot of these modalities, but they've never heard of them, so they can't use them. And most of these modalities, you have to go to a therapist. You're either in a group session or you're by yourself, and you have to do it for several weeks, but they help. But if you don't go to a therapist or you don't get to the point where you've gone through everything else, you have no way of knowing about these things. So our system doesn't help people who really need help. And I still say, we were talking about the support groups. I want you to know that there are support groups in every major city and small towns everywhere. And I don't know what it is in Germany, but in the United States, we have several organizations such as NAMI and AMI that can support you or steer you towards support groups. So,
Yes, thank you
any
so
other
much. I mean,
questions?
it's very important for us to have support groups around us. And the last question I would love to ask is basically an advice. Like, what piece of advice would you give someone who is going through this journey also? Like, apart from everything you've said so far, what piece of advice would you give someone out there in order for he or she to balance life, to be able to go on this roller coaster of emotions or, the bipolar disorder?
Well, my main purpose for having written my book was to get people to try to lessen the stigma that people have all over the world against mental illness.
Mm.
Mental illness is looked down upon by most everybody everywhere, but they have no clue what it's about, so they're just repeating what they've heard.
Mm.
So if we could lessen the stigma, that would be one thing. But the real reason I wrote the book is for people who have mental illness to understand that they can make it through, they can have a good life, and take it one day at a time and don't give up.
I like that. Take it one day at a time. Don't give up. And be consistent with the support group, with the medications that you are to take. Thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much for enlightening us about bipolar disorder, using your journey, using your own experience personally. For anyone out there who would like to connect with you and maybe work with you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, I have a website. It's author Steve W. Wilson. You can get the information from my book, Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey. Those are the best ways. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. Just go to Facebook, Steve Wilson 4.
Awesome.
Those are the best ways.
I'll place the link to your website in the show note of this episode. And from your website, one could find the information to other platforms. I encourage everyone out there to click on the link, copy the link, get a copy of the book, read about Stephen's journey, and help someone out there or even help yourself in the journey of life. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate this conversation. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Toby.
Speaking with you.
Appreciate it.
I learned from you. Thank you so much.
Hey there, podcast enthusiasts. Are you ready to add a little sparkle to your day? If you're loving the insightful conversations and captivating stories on Mirror Talk Podcast, here's a friendly nudge to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on the empowering messages and thought-provoking discussions we bring to your ears. But wait, there's more. We're all about spreading positivity and inspiration, and you can be a part of it too. How? By sharing the love with your friends and family. Share this episode with your loved ones, and let's create a ripple effect of empowerment and growth together. And hey, if you've been enjoying what you hear, why not take a moment to leave us a glowing 5-star review? Your feedback fuels our passion to keep delivering content that resonates with you. So hit that subscribe button, share the love, and leave us a review. Let's keep the conversation going and spread the Mirror Talk magic far and wide. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, your support means the world to us.